Welcome to Zero Fightstick, the tutorial series that shows you how to build a fight stick from the ground up. Alright, in this lesson we're going to talk about wiring, and no, this is not the same fight stick you've seen in these other videos in this series. This is my first build that I'm rewiring pretty much from the ground up, and it has a Crown 301, Crown 202 buttons, this little panel that I made for status, and a retro board. I am kind of getting it ready for dual modding, which will mean it has not only the retro board for old systems, but a UFB or whatnot for newer ones. Alright, so what do we need? We've got all this cool stuff in here, but obviously it doesn't magically connect itself. I want to go over the basics of wiring this, as well as, what's the shortcut way, what's the easy way, and before we move on to the more complicated ones. So, let's talk about the easy way. So, if you're looking just for a quick, I want to hook it up now and play today, I don't want to spend 40 hours doing my own wires, this is the route for you. Alright, what you're going to want for the easy route is one of these 20-pin harnesses. And if you like, you can do more zip ties than what comes on it, and these are sold about anywhere. You can get them from Arcade Shock, Focus Attack, Paradise Arcade I believe has them. If you're elsewhere, just check the local arcade shop of your choosing, and they probably have something like this. They do have color-coded wiring, and another optional thing you can get is one of these guys. It has a little JST 4-pin connector on here, 4 wires on the end, and you can use this for your L3, R3, and touchpad connections. The retro doesn't support that, but that's okay. We've got a button for it, and I'm going to hook it up anyway. I won't be using these in this build, but I do want to show you kind of the basics of how to use them. Now, once you have your book board installed, and we covered how to do that in the previous lesson, you just want to locate this 20-pin connector and take a look at the pins on here, because you can reverse this, and that's bad. On the brick board, for this retro one, it has 1, 2 here, 1920 over here, and we just want to make sure this red and orange is on the side of the 1 and 2 pin, and you just kind of work that down. Don't push super hard. You don't want to break your board or anything until it's firmly in position. You should have the Dupont connector, this black connector, flush against the connector on the bottom. Now, for some reason your brook board does not have this, or you're not using a brook board, then you're going to have to come up with your own solution, or it'll have a solution that's already provided with it, such as the zero delay encoder board should come with its own kit. But for the brook boards, this is the easiest way to get things connected. Now, you're looking at all this, and it's still a mess of wires, and you're like, oh my gosh, where does this go to? Well, the first set, we'll start from one side and work our way in. This is your joystick connector. So it's a 5-pin SAMWA connection. Now in this I have a crown, and most K levers and some other levers do not have that standard. So this is something you can get to convert that, and you just match red to red, orange to orange, etc., and there you're set to go. Otherwise, on the joystick, for SAMWA, you'll just hook it up. It'll be, if you've mounted it right, it should point that way, and you'll just hook it up this way. And for Famitsu, it's flipped around. That should work. Other joysticks might be weird one-offs, and you'll have to do something like convert it if you've got a non-PCB solution like this, where it's just connect to the switches. Otherwise, yeah. Alright, so the next part, if I can extract it, these get a little bit ornery sometimes, especially these ground chains. Okay, this is going to be your start select, and if you're reading the blog, I'll have a picture of how these work. Start select guide, and also you'll have these 3 ground chains that you can connect to the other side. And then next up, you have your punch series, and you'll notice that these go, there's one short, one a little bit longer, one a little bit longer than that, and finally the longest one. And really it's simple. You just connect, these guys will be at my punch. I'm just going to make like I'm doing it. You just kind of shove these down, and then they go right in order, so you can't screw that up. The next set is just the same thing, but for your bottom row of kick buttons. And then finally, the last thing you have is this ornery ground chain. So all you will do is hook that up to your other side. Now, on most buttons, it does not matter which side you hook up to the signal, which are the the first set of wires I showed you. It can be these guys, whatever, and which side you hook up for ground. Doesn't matter. You can flip them on each one if you really feel like it, but I really do like, say, I'll assign the tops to signal and then the bottom ones to ground, just because, it's however you want to do it. Just be consistent, that's all. So, when you're hooking these quick disconnects up, these are 2.8 millimeter or 0.110 inch, I believe. You just want to, it's going to be hard to see, but you'll see these fins, and these have little insulated sleeves. Make sure those cover when you get it on. And there's kind of these little tabs that are rolled over. So you just want to slide the terminal into there. Now, some quick disconnects are weird. They'll have little center tabs, which you'll need to press to release, but these do not. So push it down until these give me a little bit of a click, just not much of one, and then just to pull off, apply it off like that. If you have existing buttons and you have trouble removing this quick disconnect, first I recommend, if you can slide the nylon cover down, great, do it. And then if you can, just wiggle a small screwdriver into these little folded over flaps and kind of work it loose. There is the Buttercade 110 removal kit out there if that helps, but usually just getting a good grip on it, and make sure when you're gripping it, wire is a no-no. Don't do that, because you can pull it straight out, and if you don't have tools, you're kind of going to be screwed. You don't want to handle it by this if you can avoid it, the front end. Try and handle it by the back end here. Squeeze, give it a good pinch. Squeeze off. If you really absolutely must, use pliers, but just be careful not to squeeze too hard, because you'll strip it right off. You'll damage it. So, and if you do end up bending out those flaps a little bit, make sure you squeeze them back down so they can be reused, but be careful not to crush them. All right, so that's the basics of using this 20 pin. There's a similar approach with the L3 R3 touchpad cable, in that you will just connect it, I believe it's J10 on this board. What you want to do is, these JST connectors are two-sided and they are keyed. So this has a tiny little groove up here and no grooves on the back. You'll see the little silver things from, points at the pins. You just want to kind of slink it in there and guide it in. It'll snap. And to remove it, you just kind of need to wiggle it. You may need a precision screwdriver to wiggle it out, what have you. And then these are just the same as the other connectors. You'll just run it over and then connect the ground chain to the 3 buttons you've got there. So that, if you only have that going for you, that's all you'll need. If you have a stickless, hitbox, mixbox, whatever, it might be a little different as far as connecting your directionals. So this is a modification for Korean sticks, or sticks that don't have the PCB connection, which is this guy. Almost call it a Sanwa connector, just universally. There is a hitbox adapter that does much the same. It'll connect to this guy, and then it'll just kind of translate it, convert it over to button connections, like all these quick disconnects, and you just connect the corresponding directions. And that's all you have to do. All right. So that's the easy method. If you want to stick around for the nitty-gritty of building cables, stay tuned. Alright, welcome to the advanced section of the tutorial where we show you how to build your own cables from the ground up. Now what are you going to need to do this? Well, it's going to depend on how complicated you want to get, but you're going to need some wiring to start with. And you know, you might go out to Amazon, you're going to see a ton of different options, or you've gone to whatever electronic shop and you see so much and you're just like, I don't know what I need. Well, good thing is I'm here to show you what I prefer. And you'll see I have boxes here of 22 AWG stranded, same in solid, and 24 AWG. Now first let's start with what is AWG, and that's just American wire gauge. It's a standardized kind of way to say this wire is this thick, this wire is this thick, and so on. So the 22 is actually going to be, and you're really hard to see this, a tiny bit thicker than the 24, and generally 24, if that's all you want to buy, it'll work all around. It works pretty well. Now you can go higher, which makes it smaller, and some builders prefer stuff like 26, 28, maybe even 30. However, I do find when you go back and try and put that into your quick disconnects, these little guys here, or the ones I've been using, which are these insulated quick disconnects, it's really hard to make those crimp down and stick. Even sometimes the 24 is a little ornery with these, but generally it works pretty well. 22 I will try and use in other situations, but if you don't want to get it, it's definitely not necessary. Alright, so what's the difference between stranded and solid? Well, stranded has, if you cut one of these open, and let's show you how to do that. You'll just need a pair of wire strippers. These are going to be mandatory. I really don't recommend trying to use scissors or stuff like that. You'll just always get uneven results. So you just want a pair of wire strippers that has the gauge wire that you want to work with. So in this case, the 24s. And all you do is find the section there, and then line it up inside, matching that, squeeze it down, pull it off. You should see a little bit of PVC or silicone, whichever material you end up getting. And then you'll see that you have some silver strand. Now when you're going out and shopping for wire, I do recommend you look for the wire being tinned. It makes it just easier to work with, I feel. Yeah. Usually when I see wire that isn't tinned, it will tend to break and do all sorts of stuff that I just don't like it doing. So the tin tends to stick together better. It's just better if you get that, and it doesn't really cost that much. Anyway, so stranded is going to be several strands, all meshed together, and you can kind of peel them back. So, and then solid, if we take a piece here, go ahead and strip that. One solid wire. And you'll notice I can bend this and it will keep its shape. But with stranded, if I do that, it just goes back to regular shape. Now, some builders swear by solid. Some I've used pretty much exclusively stranded. I've used solid as well. It works fine. I just feel like there's slightly better contact properties here. Maybe that's just me. I don't know how to scientifically prove that, honestly. But I prefer, if you get one kind of wire, 24 AWG stranded, and there's one more thing to consider. That is whether you want to get a silicone covering or, I believe this is the PVC. And I find the PVC is stiffer, a little harder to cut, but not, only marginally so. While the silicone is softer and bends a little bit more. I haven't really found a big difference when I try and do cable sleeving, which we'll talk about, but it is there and it's something to consider. So, stranded wire is usually recommended when you move things around a lot. Whereas solid wire is, you've got a pretty stationary install. You've got a Fightstick. It will, if it's going to be traveling with you, maybe this might be a consideration, but not really. So if you want to try both, go for it. It's really up to you, but I do recommend 24 AWG stranded. This is the silicone. It works pretty well. I like it. I've pretty much used this entire box. PVC works, but if I had to buy again, I'd probably get another silicone. Alright, so that said, that's your wiring choices. What else are you going to need? Well, I mentioned it before, and let's see if I can get some zoom in. Come on. Here we go. Extreme close-up here. These are insulated quick disconnects, and these are the 2.8 millimeter or I believe 0.110 inch. These are used in most every push button out there. You do need some different sizes for switches or other applications, but these are your mainstay. You probably want, if you can get a pack of, if you're building one stick, 50 more sticks, 100, something like that. They're not too expensive. If you're going to make your wire fancy, you're going to need, well, actually, let's get this guy. I recommend some heat shrink, and let's zoom out so you can see it. So this is just some material you can cut to size, and I like the heat shrink that has glue inside of it because you'll heat it up and then it will adhere a little bit better and not go everywhere. If you want one of these kits, is great. You have multiple sizes and that'll really facilitate you doing this stuff. I never found a use for these tiniest sizes, but the larger ones, yeah, and I just got a whole big stick of one, which really helps. Another thing for doing fancy cables is this PET expandable cable braid, and you can get this either Amazon or eBay. eBay, they were having a ton of these different colors for super cheap. And I got some interesting colors there, but here's some. Now there's different sizes, so what do you want? This is probably the smallest size. I believe this is a quarter or an eighth of an inch. And I find this fits maybe a maximum of 2 wires before it gets ornery. So that's good for 2 wires. This is a little bit bigger. I believe it's 6 to 8 millimeters, and this will fit about maybe a maximum 6, 7, 8. Is what I feel comfortable with there. So you can get 4 millimeter for 3 to 4 wires. Smaller sizes obviously take up a slightly less amount of room and just look neater. So where you can get away with using smaller cable wrap, I would do it. So there's that. Okay, and so we've got the heat shrink, the wire wrap if you want it. If you want to be fancy, we've covered quick disconnects, but sometimes when you're making wires, you want to make them for the brick boards, and you're going to need these guys. And let's zoom in again. So these are Dupont connectors, and if you can, I would get one of the 20 pins, but this is a 9x1, so we got 18, and then we just add 2 more if you want those power pins. Those last 19 and 20 pins, if you have nothing to power, no switches, or you're not using the optical joystick or whatnot, hey, guess what? You don't need that. You can just stick that on. And you'll also need pins for them. And these guys, you'll break off one, and then we'll show you how to set wires in here and then crimp them so you're ready to go. Another thing you'll need if you want to, let me drop everything, is I just got myself a kit. I usually do. And then you have all the things you want. For the brick boards, there are JST, as we showed you with the L3R3. You get these little guys, these little connectors, and their own pins. This kit actually came with some decent ones. The kit I got originally for Dupont connectors had really crappy pins. I had to order some new ones, just as an aside. And these kind of the similar process to the Duponts. They're just a little bit smaller, and this is why I like the 24 AWG, because they'll fit it just right. The 22, super dicey. The first time I tried to make some cables, I had only the 22, and it was a nightmare trying to shove them in there. So if you want to take advantage of, say, turbo, or you want to make your own L3, R3 touchpad, or your own status, you're going to need 2 4-pins for the L3 and for the turbo, and 1 5-pin female. You don't want the ones like this that have pins in them. Those don't help you because we're not mounting them on the board. You want a female one like so. Actually, you'll need 2 of these to make a status cable if you're making a female to female. Otherwise, whatever you want to do. Now on the previous one, I used a pretty janky setup with some screw-in LEDs, and if you look, let me put this aside without spilling it everywhere. I've still retained one. You'll see that I have this BitBang Gaming set up now. That is a whoop. Let me try putting in the camera. I have this BitBang player LED set up now that takes a 5-pin and 5-pin over here, so that's why I need 2 5-pins. But if you do the old LED setup where you chain them together, you obviously would just wire them directly with a ring terminal or fork terminal. So, okay, and just so you know, if you've decided to go that old route, let me get it back in the camera. Cool. This is an E10 socket with an E10 3.3 volt bulb LED, so they last, practically forever. Okay, let's build a wire with a quick disconnect on the end of it. Really easy, and I'll show you how. All you're going to need is that wire, which normally we pre-measure it for the application you have, but just for this example, we're going to go for it. And then you're going to need the quick disconnector of your choice. This is kind of the standard one with a little rubber sleeve or whatever, and this is an insulated one. And you're just going to need some wire strippers and the crimper that applies to this. So for this guy, I'm using the Quebec SN48B, and that just came with the kit I had. And for the insulated one, I have this Hystronica. I don't know the model number of it, but it has the red, the blue, and the yellow, but we're going to be using the red, obviously. So there you go. All right, first step is take our piece of wire, and I like to use a little dish so I don't make a mess. Find about how long you want it, and just squeeze and pull. And there you go. Now, if you're in a pinch, you can use scissors or something else, but I really recommend getting a proper wire stripper. It just makes your life a lot easier, especially if you have to take off the ends of a lot. Now, in this case, I've really cut off a lot, and that's probably too much. And if you do that, that's okay. In most applications, when you have the bare wire like this, if you're fine. But all you need to do is, if you have some side clippers, that's even better, but toenail clippers work great. I'll just kind of get an eyeball of how much I want to trim that by, and there we go. Shake out the little stranded ends, and I give it a little twist just so it sticks together. So what I want to do now on the standard quick disconnect is, you'll see there are 2 sets of tabs. There's this back side, and then there's this shorter mid set of tabs. And the middle set of tabs, we want to line up with the exposed wire we just stripped up. And then the back side here, we want to make sure we have the silicone or PVC or whatever material the sleeving is. So you just kind of line it up, and we can see, yeah, that's good. If we see that this exposed wire is poking into here, this end, that's bad. So let's zoom in just so you guys can see a little bit more. So hopefully it will focus just enough. So this is about where we'll want it, but if we see it up here, that's no good. All right, let me zoom back out. Okay, so what I like to do with these guys, these are ratcheting crimpers, is you'll just line up. So you'll notice this has little wings kind of when you look at it that way, and it fits this little slot back here. Now I just match the V shape to the V shape, so you kind of end up with a double V of sorts, and then give it a little squeeze. Make sure you stay lined up and that you're not squeezing the forward wings. If we're doing that, that's bad. We only want to get the back tabs in the crimper, otherwise this is going to be a bad crimp. You're just going to destroy your retention tabs. Okay, so, all right. And you can kind of hold it down at you can press it just enough. It should hold. Okay. Next, we're going to just line up that wire we have. All right. Poke it through. Make sure it's on the inside line. And then on the other side, you should see the exposed wire come through, and you want it just inside those front tabs, and then give it a squeeze. Alright, now sometimes when you're working with thinner wire like this, I just go ahead and give it another squeeze on a smaller setting, and that tightens it up. So I started on a 1.5 millimeter and then went to a 1, and that seems to lock it down pretty well. If you have to, give it another squeeze with your pliers to make sure it's in. But there we go. Now what's one thing I missed? Well, luckily we have another side of the wire, but if you didn't have that, if that was already terminated, we'd kind of be screwed up. So we just want to slide on that cover, and you're set to go. Alright. Now, maybe it's because I forget these all the time, so make sure you do, I like to use these insulated ones, and that requires the other crimper. Now I've already stripped this off. It's about the right length, a couple millimeters or so. I'll just go ahead and take this, and you'll notice there's different size. So there's this side which is a little deeper, and this side was a little shallower, so we just want to match like so. And then give it a little squeeze. It should lock into position. Make sure it's rotated the way we want. And then just insert here just a little bit. It's hard to see this one, unfortunately, so you don't want to go super far in. And then just give it a squeeze. Alright, and there you go. Now that one is terminated, and you don't need to remember any sleeves whatsoever. So that's how to do quick disconnects of this type or this type.